I'm going to introduce you to a way of solving bird behavior problems that I have literally never seen anywhere before. This is a mindset based in science that I follow every single time I am faced with one of those kind of intrusive behavior issues where I don't really know where to start. The reason why this is different is because it's not just a basic training skill like how to shape behavior, how to use positive reinforcement to stop a biting parrot, train a vulture, or anything like that. That's because when your bird does something for a while, they're getting a predictable response and they have little reason to try anything else. They know what happens every time they scream or lunge at you, even if it's not the best consequence. We still act in predictable ways when they do so, and that's what's comforting to them. This is an entire set of scientific principles. No marketing gimmicks, no fancy constructs that mean something different to everyone, and the power in them is that they're just vague enough. Now, I grew up with terms like nurturing guidance, abundance weaning, hormonal behavior for parrots, and things like psychological appetite when I was starting my professional training career. Now we hear things like permission-based training and choice and control. If your bird isn't doing what you want, it's because you don't have enough of these, and these concepts don't actually mean a whole lot on their own. Believe it or not, these are not science-based concepts. We can go on a deep dive on each one of them, but I'll leave that for another time. We all have limiting beliefs that are stopping us from succeeding with the animals in our care. Now, what are these? Advice that has entered the zeitgeist that isn't helpful. This means that whatever space you live in, parrot internet, zoo creepers, or falconry Facebook, you are familiar with the types of prescriptive answers that people offer to problems that fit neatly in the social media comments. Or maybe a mentor or a superior even told you that what you're doing is flat wrong. I can't tell you how long it took me to get the words out of my head that bird is too fat or the bird is behaving hormonally, even when I knew it wasn't necessarily true. It's because that this is the vocabulary that I was hearing at my job or in the communities that I was in. These pat answers that actually open up more questions than they solve, provide unresearched responses, and are often veiled by ego-driven methods and marketing gimmicks, or maybe are based in older techniques. Maybe even all of the above. It's really confusing and frustrating to decipher because you just want your problem fixed. Think I'm blowing these out of proportion? How many times have you seen hormones as the issue for problem behavior in parrots? I've seen biting, screaming, attacking, refusing to step up, swallowing non-food items, and single-person birds being scapegoated as hormonal. How often have you been told to ignore screaming or biting to show that it shouldn't matter to your responses? And guess what? It doesn't work. How do I know this? First, because you're here. Second, because you're human. Eventually, these screams can outlast the most dedicated person. And if you can outlast them, not every person in your household can, and even a bite from a green cheek conure can really hurt, and that bite is serving a purpose to the bird because the bird has not stopped biting. Now let's flip over to raptors, where the answer to many questions is commonly that the bird needs to lose more weight or needs more manning. While you can reduce your bird of prey's food intake and get the one behavior you might be looking for, you can create a lot more headaches for yourself. I want to underline that I have been using this mindset that we're going to talk about for over a decade. But how I taught this 12 years ago, let alone 2 years ago, is different than how I do so today. And that's good because I want you to know that I am responding to data and experimental results. My data set is getting bigger and bigger. I am learning just as you are, and we are seeking solutions that offer mutually beneficial behaviors, and we assess the costs and benefits to you, your bird, and the team of people in your environment. The ethos from the very beginning has been that about pragmatism. The best solution is one that is humane and one that you can implement. It does no one any good to have a rigorous training program that your family is going to have to ditch out on and you have no energy to implement after a hard day of work and you just aren't seeing any results after the second training session. You need to see that this is working. So with that in mind, this is about a mindset shift. It's about building your skills and the bird that you're working with skills. So the environment that produced the problem behavior has to be different than the environment that will solve it. That means changing our habits. The beginning stages are not going to be easy, but they're also not going to look like the end stages of the program that you implement. Our brains do not like this kind of change, and it's the same reason that you might have found yourself exhausted at the beginning of vacation or isolating at home, even if you weren't doing much. It's a lot to think about when your routine is upended. It's okay. Take it slow and one bit at a time. I definitely recommend that you check out our Fundamentals of Bird Behavior course or the Bird Training Basics if you really want to make these concepts stick. But you can still get a lot out of what I'm talking about and what I'm going to say here. We have those on demand, and I will link those in the notes as well as in the Avian Behavior Lab. Now, the first step in the first phase is about preventing the problem behavior from occurring. We might have to make different environmental arrangements or furnishings in order to prevent the bird from rehearsing this problem behavior. Now, I want you to think critically about what this looks like for you. Whatever your bird is doing that is the problem, the behavior is producing a functional consequence that works for your bird. If your parrot or even your hawk is attacking a household member or a person that walks close by, they are getting some desirable reaction out of this system. The person leaves. Usually the bird bites, foots, and is flooded with hormones and many other things that come out of this interaction. If your parrot screams, even if you go up to cover the cage, your parrot is getting your attention by getting you to come close. So if your parrot screams when your family returns from work or school, is there a secondary play space that it can be in before they return so that familiar problematic cue doesn't come into contact with the behavior? Even if the owl that you're working with shows a fear response when you come near the mews, it's still demonstrating behavior that works to get the desired consequence. Someone eventually leaves. Instead, we can find ways of providing husbandry and hygiene that also keep the stress and behavioral welfare top of mind. When we prevent the problem behavior from happening, it also creates time and space for us and our birds to build skills so that in the future, when they face these problematic cues, they're going to respond differently. So that's the point of the prevention phase. So whatever you have to do, stop exposing your bird to the same problem cue. You will keep getting the problem behavior, and this will subvert your process. You'll keep getting bitten. You'll keep getting excessive noise. Your bird isn't going to step up, and it will keep showing fear responses. We have to prevent the problem behaviors before they start until we have built the proper skills. So this brings us to the second part, building replacement behaviors. Many of our biggest problem behaviors actually happen because our birds don't have enough of the mutually desirable skills to offer. It's no coincidence that problem behaviors are more prevalent than beneficial ones. It's actually part of our nature to inadvertently reinforce the behaviors that annoy us. That's because we have a negativity bias, meaning that we have the propensity to attend to, learn from, and use more negative information far more than positive information. We're attracted to problems, and our attention reinforces them. We need to build skills in our birds that they can offer not only in place of screaming, biting, attacking, and fear responses, as would be the case of differential reinforcement, but also we're referring to replacement skill building as creating a foundation of beneficial behaviors that the animal can fall back on instead of those vices. This is where historically we have seen differential reinforcement of an incompatible, other, or alternate behavior. This is when we reinforce a beneficial behavior instead of the undesirable one. For instance, instead of rushing at the door as I'm opening it, I might reinforce stationing somewhere else. DRO, DRI, and DRA, as they're known as, are not always helpful, and that's because we want to use the same contingency that's maintaining the problem behavior to fix the behavior. But also in the case of adjunctive behaviors such as pacing and feather plucking, we need to think more critically about what we're doing. If I have to hear one more person recommend chewing on something else other than feathers as the cure for feather destructive behavior, I will spit. It's complicated, y'all. But back to replacement behaviors. The more skills we can train our birds to do, the more we will fill up their pie chart of their day with beneficial behaviors. When we were working with Snowball, the umbrella cockatoo, who spent his first 5 years in a closet, we threw the book at him in terms of building behavior. Target, crate, Foraging, stepping up, stationing, waving his little foot on cue, stepping onto new places, learning to bathe voluntarily, riding around on the arm, going back inside the home space. You named it, we trained it. We also did something similar with a 12-year-old ambassador turkey vulture we consulted with who had very few skills and would grab at anyone's ankles after a few seconds in the space with them and could also deliver a painful bite to the bicep when she was on the glove. She wasn't great at crating and was difficult to have her aviary cleaned because of her behavior. This was a great opportunity for us to create some temporary furnishings for successful shifting opportunities and then build her skills as she was more comfortable trying new behaviors like craning. Up to this point, we have relied more on preventative and replacement strategies to keep our bird from rehearsing problem behavior. I'm going to keep saying that the importance of this strategy cannot be understated. We are resetting some tracks here. We want to decouple the problem antecedent problem behavior contingency that has so strongly produced reliable, predictable consequences, even if they are seemingly low value. The final phase is the training component as we want to familiarize ourselves with the goal scenario. Up to now, we have put ourselves in laboratory mode. The prevention and replacement strategies were energy and resource intensive because they needed to be. We had to reset the environment to create new behaviors and contingencies, meaning we needed a new behavior and new consequence equation. Now we want to move back into real life mode, but we need to do so in a careful way. This is where we start reintroducing the old cues with the new behaviors, but not at their fullest expression. For instance, if your bird charges at the door when you approach, and it was so strong that we used preventative measures until we could train a station behavior ex situ, and now we're ready to test it out, we can weaken that cue by starting further away first and have someone ask the bird to station. When birds have a lot of history engaging in the problem behavior, the conditions to keeping them successful in the new behaviors are keeping our intervals short to avoid failure, i.e. having them access other parts of the house, make the right behaviors easy and obvious, and the energetic hurdle to access those behaviors really low. This is why training many different replacement behaviors to fluency is really helpful. They can pick among a suite of behaviors to offer, increasing the opportunities for reinforcement. This means that we are increasing their degrees of freedom, which is the true measure of choice. If you really want to see these concepts in action, we have live trainings and behavior makeovers with our labs inside the Avian Behavior Lab every month. What you can see is where our members have taken our courses and have the skills, and now we fill in the gaps with how to apply these concepts in real life situations. It's really powerful to be part of these light bulb moments for so many people and their birds, changing the lives and relationships of them together. You can be part of it too. Try out the Avian Behavior Lab for 14 days with the coupon code AVIAN, AVIAN, with any of our memberships at avianbehaviorlab.com. I highly recommend the premium subscription as it gives you so many upper level options, including the forum where you can literally submit your own videos for feedback. So let's take a real life example from one of my consultations. A client had a 12-year-old parrot that was really going after her husband. Every time they sat down to eat at the table together, the bird would climb off or flutter from his cage and come after him. In the living room, the bird would come find the husband from his play gym and run up the man's pants and bite his hands. So how do we fix this? Our first preventative measure focuses on keeping the parrot from attacking the man at all costs first. If the man was at the table, the parrot needed to be somewhere that he could not get to the man. If the bird needed to be in the cage or play gym, then we set him up with foraging items and what we knew he would play with. If we needed to shape new replacement behaviors to stay busy, then we did so. In every instance where the parrot would have attacked the man, we made it physically impossible for him to do so. We concurrently created the motivation in many different ways to build new beneficial behaviors, such as foraging and seeking behaviors that the bird could engage with his environment that didn't involve human interaction. Now comes the training part. This part takes careful consideration that is backed by behavior science that many behavior consultants won't talk about. We have to talk about what contingency is maintaining the problem behavior, and the reason why people won't talk about this is that the information may not be readily available to us. We are used to talking about the ABCs of behavior as though we have all of the information right there in front of us and everything is knowable and observable, but sometimes it's simply not. Sometimes it takes more experimentation and inquiry, and that's not an easy thing to tell people or for people to hear. It means we can't just guess. So in this case, we have to ask ourselves, was the attacking being maintained by positive reinforcement, meaning the bird got something of value from the man and his behavior, or was the attacking serving to get the man to leave? Because when we enter the training phase, we want to address this. This is really important to figure out. So for instance, a goal behavior for this family was that the parrot would stay and busy himself on the cage or play gym while they ate breakfast. We began letting the parrot out in short intervals to play with his foraging. That was a fine replacement behavior, but we still had to address what the bird wanted in the first place. We experimented that he actually wanted attention from the man, that it wasn't that he, quote, hated him. Not my words. This is where those constructs can be nefarious, actually, because hate is very different than desirous of attention. So we began our training phase by having the man walk over to the cage ever so often to say hello or pop a treat in a treat cup and return to the table using a random schedule of reinforcement. As the program went on, the intervals the bird was out got longer and the schedule of reinforcement changed. And our target was that the bird would keep playing on his cage until the man was done reading his newspaper, after which he would go say hello to the bird and give him a few treats. It actually worked, and it only took a few short weeks after years of fighting this uphill fight. Incorporating various aspects of behavior science doesn't have to feel unwieldy or clinical. It can take you a few weeks of more focused work to untangle years of frustration, but it's totally worth it. The problem-solving paradigm course is available on demand and inside the Avian Behavior Lab. I'll link it for you in the notes, and you can figure out how you can fill in the gaps of your understanding of science.